to talk about Paul LePage. Certainly that's something that can be done in January. It's not something that's going to change in the near future, and whether or not other leadership want to do a poll or not, those results aren't going to change. And my reading of the Constitution is that means we're not going to come in.
Ken, what's your reading of the caucus? How many of your members would be in favor of coming back versus how many want to go forward with no action?
Well, I think that's, it would depend in part on what was being asked, but I think at the end of the day, my read of my caucus at our meeting is that a majority, a solid majority, does not want to come back.
So this means no special session?
I think people can talk about it. I think particularly Democrats want to continue to play this, continue to run it as part of the news cycle, that we want to come in, but House Republicans didn't want to vote against your local House Republican. But that's not what's going to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, we are still a country of laws and not of men. We'll take a vote if they have to, but we're not going to vote to come in my opinion.
Ken, it's really the cost? Is that what you're suggesting? This seems like a waste of time and a waste of resources to have this debate?
No, I think that the cost is part of the process. I mean, the House, for example, isn't even working right now. The House is torn apart. What are we going to do? Go hold this at the Civic Center? So that's an additional cost. We're going to use taxpayer dollars to do this, and then come in and do what? I mean, pass a joint resolution that really is not allowed for in the Constitution. There is no censure provided for in the Constitution. We can only censure our own members, can expel our own members, but we can't do that to a third separate branch of government, which is the governor.
Representative, would you make any commitments to be willing to do this in January? You're unopposed in your race, so you're coming back, right? I mean, pretty much, barring any unfortunate circumstance, you'll be coming back, right?
Do you know something I don't?
I don't want to,
anybody out there in particular I should be worried about?
I always get in trouble for speculating. I just don't want to speculate.
Well, look, I mean, I think the reality is, look, I mean, when we come back in January, we're back here, and I mean, anybody can put anything in. I mean, someone, I guess, could submit a joint resolution or ask for anything. I mean, they can do that. That's a different process than where we are right now. The process that we would be asked for right now is, are we going to come in for a special session? Quite frankly, you have members now of this legislature who, quite frankly, in 8 weeks will no longer be members of the legislature unless they've been reelected.
So the question remains that people may be asking is, what happens the next time the governor speaks out of line?
Look, I think the reality is, I think this governor is well aware that he's on a very short leash, that people are watching. Republicans are watching. Democrats are watching. The nation is watching. And he needs to continue to be respectful, to understand that he has said something that's horrific and that he needs to be accountable for that. And I think he has been accountable to the extent that he has sought some spiritual help. He's talked to his family. He's met with Representative Gattin, apologized to him. He's apologized to the people of Maine. And look, I think as every day goes by, if there's some event that we need to address, then we address that.
So the next one is not necessarily the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Well, again, you're asking me to speculate on something that we really don't know about. But I mean, the reality is, again, we all have a job to do. We've all been elected in House districts throughout the state. The governor is the only person who's been elected statewide. And so, we have different functions, and we're in different branches of government. But again, we are keeping a close eye. We will continue to keep an eye on the governor to make sure that Maine is put in the best light forward that we can, not only in Maine, but throughout New England and the country.
What's the divide between you and the Senate right now on this?
I'm not going to comment on that.
And how much are you concerned about your members getting punished by voters because of this whole thing?
Well, look, in having our caucus the other night, people understood where the issues were, what they are, and again, people were well aware of where we were at going forward, where we were at in an election cycle, and what the governor did. And again, I think everyone was pretty solid in the fact that we don't want to come back in a special session.
So I think I asked this a moment ago. So does this end it? I mean, is there anything else that will happen to try to force a special session?
Well, look, in my opinion, the answer is no. I mean, quite frankly, in my opinion, Democratic legislative leaders can come out and say, hey, geez, we need to do something about this. And, what is that? And then we're going to fight about the process for a week. Who can poll what, and what's the poll question going to be? And in my opinion, at the end of the day, House Republicans are not going to support a special session, and this conversation is going to be done. That's what I think is going to happen.
But it's not done yet.
But it's not done yet. But I think that's going to be the process, and I think that's going to be the end result.
In your opinion, the governor there's no real cause for the governor to resign here. Is that the opinion of the House GOP caucus?
That's a question for the governor to decide, not the House caucus.
I mean, well, you guys have issues with coming back and the mechanics of it and the cost of it, and so ultimately, I mean, do you have an opinion on that? I mean, do you think this has been, one step too far, or what do you tell a voter? If you were in a competitive race, what would you tell your people?
The reality is that the governor has to make that decision.
I mean, if I'm a voter and I ask you, Ken, what do you think?
Well, look, the reality is I think the governor is the governor. He was elected by the people of the state of Maine, and he has to make that decision. It's not up for me to tell the governor what he has to do in resigning or not.
What do you mean by keeping a close eye on the governor?
What's that?
What do you mean by keeping a close eye on the governor?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of media here, I'm sure, that are going to be doing that. And so I think that certainly to the extent that there's anything public or and whatnot, that we'll watch that and we'll respond to that in the appropriate time and in an appropriate way.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Have you talked to him recently? Have you talked to the governor recently?
We continue the lines of communication, both with the staff and with the governor. And again, we just want to focus on, look, at the end of the day, guys, again, there are big issues out there. And I guess the media can say that this is going to be an election about a referendum on Paul LePage. But look, again, this, I think, should be a referendum about the issues. No one really wants to talk about that because there's been, some very significant things done over the last 6 years. Regulatory reform, income tax reductions, 2 income tax reductions, some very good things, welfare reform. So people, I guess, can try to really put this down and say, this is an election on Paul LePage. And Democrats will do that. I have no doubt about that. But if Mainers in Maine really care about continuing to move Maine forward like we did the last 6 years, they'll focus on the policies that House Republicans, Senate Republicans, and issues that we've done in a bipartisan way have been passed in the last 6 years, which are making a difference. That's what I believe should be talked about.
Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate
I
it.
talked to members of the caucus, and they've said, we would support censure, but not impeachment. Is that your reading?
I'm not going to comment.